Hey, friends, and welcome back to the #ActuallyICan podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to Victoria Male, a screenwriter and storyteller who's turned grief into a source of creativity and courage. After losing her father in 2017, Victoria left her Hollywood career to pursue writing full-time. We're sort of fangirling over here from Wisconsin. Since then, she's been a finalist for the Academy Nichol Fellowship, made the 2024 Love List, and had her stories published worldwide. We're talking about how creativity helped her heal, the power of finding meaning in loss, and what it takes to turn life's toughest moments into something beautiful. Hey there, fellow rebels. Welcome to #ActuallyICan, the podcast where we say a hearty hell yes to designing life on our own terms. I'm Katie Ripp, a lifestyle coach, business mentor, and serial entrepreneur, here to guide you through the wild ride of defying what society expects of us and embracing our authenticity. On this show, we dive deep into taboo topics like death, money, spirituality, entrepreneurship, unapologetic self-care, and personal development, all while swearing and laughing along the way. Expect down and dirty conversations, plenty of humor, and a whole lot of exploration, leaving you feeling empowered to be your truest self. Whether you're craving a good laugh, seeking unconventional self-care tips, or simply looking for some camaraderie, you've come to the right place. We only get this one short life, so buckle up and let's design yours on our own terms. Ready to dive in? Let's go! Victoria, welcome to the podcast. We are so happy to have you. I would love it if you just go right into it. Tell us all about you, how you got here. So I'm going to just give you the floor.
Please. Hi. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored and thrilled to be here. I am a writer. As of last year, I can now call myself a professional writer. So that's really exciting. But that came after 10 years of hustling in Hollywood. I grew up outside of New York City in New Jersey. I'm a very proud Jersey girl. And then I went to high school and college in North Carolina, which was really funny because I was in high school right when New Jersey was the subject of every reality TV show. And the first couple of years, I'm like, no, New Jersey's great. It's so beautiful. I grew up in a horse town. Bruce Springsteen was a neighbor. It was
amazing.
Yeah, he had a horse farm in my town and it's so cool. And then there was a point where I just had to go, yeah, I'll flip a table. I just had to embrace it instead of because resistance was futile. I went to the University of North Carolina, Go Heels, where I studied drama and filmmaking. And then 2 weeks after I graduated, I moved out to Los Angeles and started working in the film industry, which was insane. And I think one of my very first Actually I Can moments was, this is so I'm just starting out with the nerdery, but I am a huge Spider-Man fan. The 2002 Tobey Maguire Spider-Man is my favorite movie of all time. And I know film people are like, Cassavetes. I'm like, Spider-Man. Oh my God, there's this joke, Letterboxd, which is this film review site. They'll ask celebrities on the red carpet what their top 4 films are, and they'll always name 4 films no one's ever heard of. Yeah. And I'm like, Spider-Man. But yeah, so anyway, that was my first Actually I Can moment because my first internship in LA was for Tobey Maguire.
Oh my God.
It was insane. It was meeting Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It was a big deal, but also it was this really beautiful experience as well because I learned what development was for film, which is, I don't think something you can really be taught in film school, or at least they didn't teach it at Chapel Hill. And it's the process of taking a script, doing revisions, and then getting the movie made. And I just fell in love with that process in a way I didn't think was possible because I grew up acting, I grew up writing, but never showing anyone my writing. And development was this amazing kind of in-between thing where you got to have a little bit of a hand in everything. And I was like, oh, this is really fun and really cool. From there, I bounced around for a couple years. Beggars can't be choosers. I was in my early 20s just trying to make it in LA. I was a researcher. I worked in casting. I was on set for a little bit. I was a talent coordinator. I was a waitress in a Hallmark movie.
I mean, you've made it.
No. So far from that. But then I think a big pivotal moment in my life and career was when I started working for Ivan Reitman, who directed the original Ghostbusters movies, the ones in the 80s. He produced all the subsequent Ghostbusters movies. He's to people my age, because I'm a millennial, I'm he directed all of your dad's favorite movies.
Oh yeah, 100%. Right.
Stripes, Meatballs, and my dad, I think that was when my father finally was okay, maybe this Hollywood thing will work out. She's working for Ivan Reitman.
Yeah, Stripes. Let's we just need to say Stripes.
Yeah, it was a big deal. And I remember, I mean, we're talking about grief and like to just get into with my father, like who's no longer with us. I remember I'm very happy he got to come visit because I used to work on the Sony studio a lot, which was awesome. It was so much fun. I really miss it. It was like a little city. You never knew who you're going to see in the coffee shop. And it was kind of magic that like, I was in an office doing like office stuff, kind of being like, this is my prison. But everyone's like, oh my God, Ghostbusters. I'm like, get away from me. Like, I have to reschedule a meeting. But like 30 yards away, Greta Gerwig's doing her Vogue 73 questions.
Oh my God.
There was like a magic, and it never totally left me every morning when I would drive through the gates, no matter how sleep deprived and like stressed out I was. But yeah, so I started working for Ivan and I was super involved and like talk about like a legend. That was a big deal. And then started really working in creative development with them. And I was walking around the Sony lot one day, and I mean, again, we can get into all the crazy Ghostbuster stories because everyone's like, what was that like? I'm like, to quote Charles Dickens, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
Yeah. I mean, I believe like I said, when we first hopped on here, I'm from Wisconsin and most of like the listeners around here are from the Midwest. So this is it's so removed from where we live and where like the lifestyle and the culture is just not where we are. I mean, some of the biggest names that we've had in the area, like down the street, Julia Roberts, when she filmed Nothing But Trouble. Is that right? With Nick Nolte. Sure. They filmed like not far from here. And like part of Animal House was done downtown Madison and Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield. That's about as far as we get.
That's amazing. My mom is from the North Shore of Chicago, so I love the Midwest. I've spent a lot of time in the Midwest.
It's just so far removed. So when you reached out, I was like, oh my. And so then I had to like deep dive into Ivan. And I was like, wow, Stripes, Meatball, right? Like all my dad's favorite movies, right?
Literally.
But really, like, I didn't realize how sort of what a legend he was in that. Like, he was in the Ghostbusters. Like, that's what I remember as a child. But outside of that, it's crazy to think of all the work people do. Sometimes I do live in a small town, but I sometimes forget how big this world is and how many like, that's the other question is like, did you know that development was a job? I wouldn't even know to like think about that.
No. And that's why I think sometimes it's like, that's why that first internship with Toby, it felt so magical. I wasn't just like meeting my childhood hero. I found this place and like this form of producing that I'm like, oh, this feels really right. Like, I love doing this. Yeah. And then, Ivan was like this whole thing. And also there was a big age difference. So it got weirdly, especially because my father died while I was working with him. And so it got weirdly like a messed up dysfunctional paternal or not paternal. And then like, and yeah, we can get into that. But yeah, it was so insane. And then at the same time, like, because his business partner was this man named Tom Pollock who ran Universal in the 90s. Like, he's the one who like greenlit Jurassic Park and Schindler's List. And everyone's like, oh, what a legend. I'm like, I just remember having to like heat up his Starbucks croissants a certain way. And like all the stereotypes, like those stereotypes about Hollywood are true. Like, I have it in a script where someone's like, it sounds just like, and I go, someone says this sounds like The Devil Wears Prada. I will gather what's left of my mind and lose it. Because it was like you had to have the coffee a certain way and this a certain way and this. And also, it was insane to be in the early stages of my career in my 20s when Me Too happened. And just like
so fascinating.
Reckoning. And I mean, all of it's true. I just read a stat that only 13% of like the major movies that came out last year were directed by women. So it's like we still have a lot to do. And I think there's a very interesting, again, it's like, oh, you were working for a legend. But at the same time, there was a very interesting article in the Hollywood Reporter that came out the end of last year saying that everyone kind of from 25 to 50 in Hollywood feels stuck because the studios have been run by like the same three people for 30 years. So that's been something too, where you're like told you're an ungrateful millennial, but like there's no way for you to advance and grow in your job. Because that was something that leads into my actually I can moment, because I was working so hard. I really wanted to get promoted. I was taking my own meetings. I was going to comic book conventions and scouting IP or intellectual property, like things we could adapt. I was finding cool. It's funny. I get very salty about this, but because when I didn't get promoted at that company, the kind of consolation prize was I had carte blanche to meet with whoever I wanted. And people were like, why are you meeting with these people? Like, shouldn't we be meeting with Chris Evans? And I'm like, Chris Evans is not going to take an informational meeting with me. Also, I have beef with Chris Evans. But anyway, everyone I met with 3 years ago is now like huge. like Nicola Coughlan from Bridgerton, Divine Joy Randolph, Oscar winner, like all these people. And it was funny because back then it was a very interesting environment because I always say I grew up there and I learned everything, almost everything I know now there. And I think that's how I became such a good writer, was sitting in those meetings, those 3-hour notes meetings, and learning and reading draft after draft after draft of a script. And then having to it's one thing just to read the drafts, but then trying to like actually think about what needs to change here and make it better was really interesting and fascinating. But at the same time, I was told, you're not ready, you're not good enough. Like, you just are meeting with this person because you think they're hot. And it was very, very bizarre. But part of my actually I can moment is I was walking around the lot one day. I'd finished a script and I'd had a friend who gave me brilliant feedback on a script. And he's like, the script, you're trying to do 30 years of someone's life in a movie. And that's really hard to do. And it's really hard to do well. And he's like, I think you take one thread and make that the movie. Or if you want to do every thread of this woman's life, it's a miniseries. And so I finally like gave up the ghost on that project. I was like, all right, this is a miniseries. And I was walking around one day and I was like, okay, well, what's something I could do as a feature film? Like, what's something that could be like narrow and deep I could do as a feature film? And I know Gene Kelly apparently never wanted a biopic written about him, but I'm sorry, I was at his old workplace because Sony used to be the MGM lot where they shot Wizard of Oz and Singing in the Rain. Yeah, all these famous movies. Sadly, like not too much of it is like the current Sony lot is 1/6 of what it used to be.
Oh, wow.
Because I think they sold off a lot of the land in the 70s. But I was walking around the MGM, the old MGM lot, the Sony lot one day, and I just had this idea of Singing in the Rain and the Red Scare. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I ended up writing a script about Gene Kelly trying to make Singing in the Rain while his marriage was falling apart because his wife is cheating on him and is blacklisted as a communist. And I sent it to a manager contact being like, would you maybe think about repping me? And he's like, yeah. And that was kind of a conflict of interest, by the way. So sometimes, again, ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, because I sent him a pilot I'd written because now we're in the pandemic. Sorry, now we're in 2020. And he goes, yeah, the pilot's good. And I want to go out with your feature film this weekend. And I was like, oh. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, my script's being read by A-listers. I'm like, oh, this is bizarre. I guess I'm a writer now. But I worked for Ivan and like they didn't know. One of my favorite memories is I was really close with Ivan's agent's assistant at Creative Artists Agency, CAA, which is like the Death Star of Hollywood. And they're like, something I didn't learn until I moved to Hollywood is like the big agencies are like the nuclei of this industry. And I'm like texting with my friend Daniel, and he's like, his boss, Ivan's agent, is on the phone with like one of the top agents at CAA talking about my script. I'm like, Brian's not putting it together, right? Like he's not putting it together that it's me.
Yeah.
It was very like weird, effed up modern Cinderella. But then, yeah. And like that script is still like making the rounds, trying to find its home. But since then, Ivan passed away. I left the company. And then that script made it to the final round back in 2023 of the Academy's screenwriting competition. So like the Academy, like the Oscars.
Oh my God.
That was really insane. But all to say, I don't think I would have had the courage to do any of this, kind of go after what I wanted unless I'd lost my dad tragically and suddenly on Christmas Eve 2017.
Oh, that was just last week, couple weeks ago. Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. We were talking a little bit before we started recording that the taboo subject of death, people have a hard time talking about it anyway, which I understand, but also talking about the silver linings of it.
Right.
Talking about the things that come out of that kind of tragedy, and you should have to be upset about this your entire life instead of taking some of the things that actually happened from it, which it sounds like you've got some. I've certainly got some that have really shaped your life and made it better because of that. It doesn't mean that we don't want that person back in our lives, but we don't get that choice. We don't get to do that. That person is not coming back. So tell me a little bit about how that specific event changed everything for you.
I mean, it was so, again, because it was an accident. So it wasn't like, and one of my least favorite things in the world is like, at least he didn't suffer. Like,
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm messing up the audio. But yeah, it was everything. It changed. And I was trying to think of what I wanted to say coming on today. And I think it's so important. And I think I came out okay-ish. I think I was really lucky that I was already working with a therapist.
Mhm.
And I think it's so important because I think there's a lot of, if you do go through loss, maybe involving a neutral third party and you're grieving and healing, because with your family, everyone's grieving at the same time and then everyone's reaching for each other, but no one's cup is full. And I think one of the biggest misnomers is that I think we have all these like preconceived notions about grief that it's supposed to bring everyone together. No. Like,
Yeah.
or that was not my experience. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, it can unearth a lot of, because again, people are grieving and then people get angry about how someone reacted. And
everybody's at different stages. And some stages are longer for others than they are for certain people, right? Like this whole, well, you should wait a year before you do anything. What's a year? What is 365 days anymore? Really, in the big scheme of things, what does that really mean? Time is so fickle in grief. It does not matter if it's 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 days, 3 decades. You don't have control over that. And I think that's one of the things that people really want is some sort of control. And those stages of grief do help, sort of give you an idea. I remember when I got COVID, I was like, on like the Harvard site of like, what's the stage? What's the next stage? Like, I want to know what to expect. Where's like, okay, now I have this shitty cough. I've had the headache. Now, how long is it going to take me to get through this next stage? I remember feeling like if I can just know what that is, and grief does not give you that opportunity.
No, I always tell people she's a sneaky bitch.
A real fickle bitch.
She is. And the biggest thing I always tell my friends, because I feel like, I lost my dad when I was 25. So it was a bit isolating in a way. And I'm very blessed that I'm blessed that other people's dads had died or parents had died. No, but I was fortunate in that I wasn't completely alone in the experience, but it was kind of isolating because typically this is something that happens if you're lucky when you're older.
Yeah.
So that was incredibly difficult. And then I think what was really hard is I think my instinct was to like take space and grieve and not rush myself. But I worked in an industry where they're like, you get a week.
Yeah. Urgency is the job description.
And it's urgency over nothing. And don't get me wrong. Like, I think art is one of the most important things on the planet.
Yeah.
We were painting on cave walls before we were selling things. But the beautiful thing about, I think, making film and making art is that it's incredibly important, but no one's going to die. It's not life or death.
Yeah, right.
No one's told the boomers.
Yeah, they don't know that there's actually no urgency, but
yes,
that's for a different
there are certain things, like, again, it's like if everything's a fire drill, then nothing's a fire drill.
Yeah. Oh, that is great. So great.
It was very difficult going back. And then also, it was kind of like, I know J.K. Rowling has become a very controversial figure, and I don't agree with her politics and opinions about certain groups of people. However, I think one of the most beautiful metaphors of grief is in Harry Potter. Again, the nerdery is popping back out again. There's in the first couple of Harry Potter books, there's like the way the kids get from the train station of Hogwarts Express up to the castle, the school, is through, it looks like carriages pulled by invisible horses. Like carriages driving themselves. And then after Harry has witnessed death, he sees that, that's actually these horses called thestrals, and you can only see them if you've seen death and experienced death. And I feel like that's like life after grief is like you've had a different filter either put over you or taken off of you, and you see things so differently. And it was so difficult going back to work. I remember January 2018, my body broke down. It was like sinus infection, yeast infection from the antibiotics, from the sinus infection, ear infection, then ear infection in the other ear, and then muscle spasm. And I was still going to work every day. Yeah. Because I was like, God forbid the meeting isn't set. Like, God forbid another assistant has to no one knows how Ivan likes his coffee.
It does really put all of that shit into perspective. I remember when Al died, we spent like 3 weeks literally just watching new kittens. We live on like a little farmette, and we had new kittens. And Dale's family, his mom, and our 2 kids who were little at the time, literally spent 3 weeks just like drinking coffee, drinking water, drinking wine on my deck, just watching kittens. And we were like, this is the only thing that needs to be done right now. Yeah. And I had never felt that before. I had never felt that nothing needed any attention except my family. And it was such an eye opener for me. I was just like, there's just no urgency anymore. Nothing will, the world is not going to stop. The world has stopped right now, for us, and it did for a long time. But it just puts everything into perspective, and it's sort of like seeing the horses.
Yeah.
And until you get there, you just can't. It's like telling a new bride or a newly engaged bride that she shouldn't have a big wedding.
Yeah.
Nope. Until you're 20 years in and you're like, shit, I should have taken the money my parents offered me.
Yeah. So I think that caused a lot of friction that I feel like I'm still working through, because I was like, this isn't that important, but my livelihood, I thought my whole future was hinging on me, like going nuts enough about setting the meeting with with the X amount of team at a certain time and making sure Ivan had nothing to be angry about in his schedule. And it was really, really difficult. And then I also know, because my sister went right back to work, and I was like, oh, well, I should be going right back to work. And there was all this pressure, and it was really, and then, you're getting calls about a private jet, and you're like, what am I doing? Like, I just like, I'm still sick, and my heart's been ripped out. But then again, you're in shock at the same time too. And that's something else when I have friends who've lost people, I always try to give them counsel on is, don't feel any pressure to feel a certain way at a certain time. Because I think also, in movies, someone learned someone died and then they just burst into tears. And a lot of the times, especially when you're close to someone, like your body's like, I don't know, you usually go into shock, or at least I went into shock. I was like numb, because it's such a trauma for your brain and your body to try to process. And then again, like, because my dad died on Christmas Eve, I think this was the first Christmas where I'm like, I'm just gonna I can't tell the Western world to not do this.
Yeah. I would like you to be upset with me, the whole world.
Yeah, like, I can't just make everyone stop doing Christmas. I would love to, but like, I'm gonna let myself enjoy this.
Yeah.
And then again, it doesn't mean that I don't love and miss and want to honor my father and acknowledge that this happened to him on this day. And I think there's also, like, I was very excited when I'm like, oh, wait, you're Catholic too? Like, and that's the other thing about grief that just blows my mind is, like, your heart has been ripped out of your chest. You're likely in shock. And then they're like, plan a party.
Yeah. Yeah. You plan.
Yes, you. And it's like, that's why I loved your episode with Good Morning. One of the most beautiful conversations I've heard in a really long time. I wish they'd been in Charlotte in 2017, though I have a sneaking suspicion my mother would have never allowed it.
Yeah. Yeah. When we talked about that too, we had a very, very traditional, 4-hour wake line the night before that we were standing in. There were 1,800 people that came through. It was... And that is a lot. You don't think about that when you're sitting in a pew watching people in a wake line. But when you're standing in a wake line, the most interesting thing to me was the people that made me cry. It wasn't the people that were closest to me. It was like a person that I hadn't seen in a while, or it wasn't my best friend from kindergarten that made me break down. Like, luckily she made me laugh. But it was people from, a job that I had 6 years ago that came around the corner, and I just lost it. It was so looking back now, it's so interesting to see how that unfolds to how something can trigger something that like really has nothing to do with the thing. It's very hard to explain. But yes, Good Morning. I feel like if we could all just embrace it and honor it like they can help people do.
Yeah.
It's just so far from tradition, and people feel comfort in tradition, and there's nothing wrong with that until it's not your tradition and you don't feel like you have the choice to do it. So,
right. And I think in some ways it was really, I think one of the things I think we did a really good job at with my family is we kind of did what worked for us and didn't within like the rigidity of Catholicism. And because I actually love going to church. I'm I don't think I agree with a lot of the political views of the Catholic Church, but I love the ritual. And I think that was a big thing too. Like my faith is something that totally helped me get through, especially that first year or so. But yeah, we did do a wake. I can't tell you what day the funeral was, but it was before, it must have been the 28th or the 29th of December. So we had it before New Year's.
Okay.
And I think we were really lucky that we had our parish in Charlotte, because that's where it happened, was massive. And I think they had like great infrastructure. So we were lucky that they kind of helped guide us through the process. And it was like, pick the hymns, do this.
Yes. Here's your book.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're like, okay. And then we were members of a country club where, again, super lucky that they knew we'd been members for like 10 years. So they knew us and they were like, yes, we'll organize the reception and gave us a discount. And so it felt like, and then my dad was cremated and we're now just going to scatter the ashes next summer. And that's
Okay.
not very perfect Catholic. But again, I think also it's like, we were like, so what? Like, we're like, okay, this is what we want to do.
Yeah.
And this is what it's for us like not necessarily like to get like gold star Catholic. I was really good at going to church last year and I was like, Catholic of the year. But like, actually that is not an award someone gives out. So like, what's the point?
Yes.
Not that you shouldn't practice your faith and be a good Christian. But anyway, it was so interesting. I found it really interesting too, because then I was like excited to see certain people. It was like a wedding.
Yes.
And you're like, oh my God, because I have a huge Irish Italian family and it was amazing how many people came down. And I was like excited to see certain people, then being like, wait, context. I'm like, old neighbors.
Why are we here?
Yeah, it was so bizarre. And then it's like, it's just a very bizarre experience. And then trying to like reintegrate back into life is absolutely nutso. And then it just got more nutso when your boss dies suddenly.
Yeah. How long after that? Well, can we just go back to the Catholic Church just for 1 second? Because I love funeral food. Like church funeral food. Like I remember thinking at the funeral that day, I was like, there's going to be so many people here. And we had a lunch in the basement. And I was like, this is going to be the best food. People are going to be like, oh my God, that is the rudest thing to say. No, I love funeral food. Like all the cheesy potatoes, all the ham, all the turkey, all the poke cake. I mean, all of it. So there are silver linings to big funerals. I'm sorry, not sorry.
Yes. Yeah. So that was, Ivan was about 2 years later.
And you worked for him the whole time after your dad.
Yeah. Well, okay. So end of 2017.
Yeah.
Actually, no. Oh my God. 5 years. What am I talking about? I'm going nuts.
Well, 2020 doesn't count.
I'm sorry. My brain is scrambled eggs.
Yeah.
And also grief brain. Such a real thing.
Oh,
such a
real
thing. Like I have not had the privilege of having children yet, but like I think mom brain and grief brain are both very valid things.
Yeah. When you have both, it's real interesting.
Oh, I can't even imagine. I bow down. But no, so my dad died Christmas Eve 2017. Ivan died Valentine's Day 2022. So 5 years.
Oh, wow.
5 years. And that was insane too, because all of a sudden I'm helping.
Was it unexpected?
Yeah.
Like this one day he was there and one day he was not.
Dude, I was on the phone with him Friday talking about next week's schedule. And then I got a call on Sunday.
Wow.
And I remember my phone was being blown up. And because that was something I so tried to do after my dad's death, was set boundaries. Yeah, it was just absolutely nuts. And then all of a sudden I remember, so my phone was being blown up. I was like, if this is about a private jet charter. And then of course it was not, and it was awful. But I think like I have to give credit to Ivan's children. They did a good job of everyone helped a little. So it kind of like was many hands lighten the load, but it was very, very, it was just like, who has their boss die on them? It's like very, and also, you know why I was saying 2 years? I just remember Tom died on my birthday in 2020.
And that was his partner.
That was his business partner. That's why it's about 2 years later.
They both died.
It was very nuts. And so it's like, I've had a lot of grief early in my life and from different places, like parent, employers, pets, which I think is like just almost, sometimes I always just think it feels like safer to grieve pets.
Yeah.
It's like not, also because likely your relationship isn't as complicated.
Well, and people seem a little bit more accepting of it, which is sort of strange. Yeah. But yes, and our kids were really young. They were only 5 and 8 when Al died, but we had lost a dog. And it's certainly different, obviously, than humans, but I do think it prepares. And you just, I mean, we were very honest with our kids. I said the only thing, when both of them died, I was like, listen, we can do whatever we want with our kids, but we're not going to lie. We're not going to say that, grandpa took a nap, because he'll never nap again. Right? Like, we were just super honest about it. And I think if you want to see grief and the stages of it, watch a kid go through it. Right? So fascinating to watch a 5-year-old walk into somebody's house and say, my grandpa's dead. Just like that. Right? Like, it was just And that was like 6 hours after it happened. And it was just like, wow, that, like talk about how much we load onto ourselves in years and years of that. Where at 5 years old, you're just like, and it's true. Grandpa was dead. Like there wasn't any way around it. She just said, that's it. And we were all like, yep, you're right. I mean,
it'll knock the breath out of you. But and then again, like I think the way I found myself processing this, and I think also one of the most important things is that like, yes, there's the 5 stages of grief, but they're again non-linear. Like it's like it's a flat circle. Like you can be angry one day and then depressed and then deny and then like blah and then this. But one thing, and I actually discovered this during the pandemic, and I guess maybe that's why I wrote the script about grief during the pandemic subliminally. I'm now making the connection, is that I can't tell you exactly who, but I was reading an article about like collective grieving during the pandemic and how we all had to grieve that like our way of life was gone. And this was, early in like April 2020 when we didn't know necessarily how long it was going to be gone for and if it would come back and all that, fun, yucky stuff. And again, like I weirdly had a great 2020. Every year since then has been like, how hard can you kick me? But 2020 was the year I got repped. I got in great shape. I was running. I wasn't binge eating to self-soothe because I was working at a place that stressed me the fuck out.
Yeah.
And I got like, I finished Showstopper, which was the Gene Kelly script, and like that blew up and that was so exciting. And that was my actually I can moment. I was like, wait. And I wish it was the fact that like, I just like did all this work and I was like, I believe in myself now. It was literally years of reading terrible scripts. I'm like, this is repped at a major.
I can do this better.
I'm just like, well, also like, I know I'm not the next great American screenwriter, but like, I think I can do this. Like,
yeah. Actually, I think I can.
Actually I can.
Yeah.
And then, and so one thing that really helped me is, and I think there's another thing too, like there's that, and I think it's a misnomer of like, write what you know. And I think what you know doesn't need to be exactly what you know. I recently read a quote that's like, write what you're obsessed with. I'm like, well, I like that way better.
Mm-hmm.
But it was during the pandemic. I think also because I was just so desperate to get out of my apartment. I love mythology and folklore, and I started looking into the folklore of the British Isles. Because we've all seen King Arthur and Robin Hood done 84,000 times to varying degrees of efficacy and entertainment. But I came across this mountain in Northwest Wales called Cadair Idris. It means chair of Idris. Idris is believed to have been a Welsh king who was like mythologized as a giant. And Cadair is like a bowl. There's a lake at the bottom, and then there's like the mountains on 3 sides, and that's supposed to be like the lake is like the seat of the chair. And then the sides are like the frame of the chair.
Throne or,
Yes. And Idris was supposed to sit there and look out on his realm. So the other cool thing about the mountain is, or the big famous legend is that if you spend a night on the mountain alone, you wake up a poet, a madman, or not at all.
Oh, so fascinating.
I interpreted that as like enlightened, crazy, or dead.
I mean,
we've all been there. So I was just fascinated by this and thinking of like, who would need, and I was like, that's a premise for a movie, a horror movie. I could count on one hand how many horror movies I'd seen in my life. I had to do all my research for writing this during the day. And then watch like the Real Housewives at night, so I wouldn't have.
So you don't freak yourself out all night.
Exactly. Yeah. But it was really funny. It was really beautiful that this process became like a way for me to kind of process and meditate on grief. And it was twofold. I think also one thing I always want to say to people when you're kind of taking, or I think it's a Carrie Fisher quote, like take your broken heart and turn it into art, is it doesn't have to be exactly your story. Because when I was acting my first couple years in LA, I studied at Warner Laughlin Studios. Warner Laughlin is the woman behind Amy Adams and Ryan Reynolds. She's a fantastic acting teacher. And the thing I love the most about her technique is it's all about creating memories for the character and not exploiting your own life.
Oh, I love that.
And Warner said has like the best rationalization for that. Like one, that's unhealthy as fuck. And two, like, you're prostituting your own life. And then I think also actors and like artists, we get into this thing like, I have to like go live so I have something to and then it's like, it's just, I think that ends in.
It's so fascinating you say that, because I think we live in this world of, this content creation and like sort of exploiting your own life. And certainly I'm on social media a lot. I
Right.
show my goats and my alpacas and, shit
And
that
don't
I do
stop.
wrong. And yeah, thank you.
Other the wrong stuff, that's up to you. But the goats and alpacas are necessary in
Yes,
this world.
necessary. But I love the way you say that because there is a fine line, I think, between exploitation, prostitution of your own life, and sharing something for the sake of sharing it and or for the sake of helping someone else.
Right.
And I think people can do that in an ugly way. There are people that do it in ugly ways, but there are people like myself that I really do want to help.
Right.
You can say that all you want. You can go out and, type that up. And we were talking about, it's so fascinating to meet people online now, which I think is talk about silver linings. I had never used a fucking Zoom in my life before the pandemic. And I sort of live on it now because it's connected me to people across the world. Right. And I find that to be so cool. And we wouldn't have gotten that had we not had the pandemic.
No.
So, talk about silver linings out of shit we said no thank you to. We get to say thank you for a lot of things after that, sort of like death. Hey there, listeners. It's Katie. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Female Founders Collective. I started this collective because I know firsthand how challenging it can be to build a business from the ground up. As female founders, we're balancing so much, our dreams, our families, our sanity, and it can feel pretty lonely out there. That's why the collective is all about real connection and support. We're a community of women who are sharing what works, what doesn't, and having each other's backs. So if you're looking for a network that truly gets it, come join us at the Female Founders Collective. We meet virtually every single Wednesday at noon Central Standard Time. It's always free. It will never be a charge. This is something that I am really passionate about. Come and join us. You can register by going to katierip.com. I digress and I segue from that. I'm so sorry. But I'm so fascinated by your screenplay. Is it a screenplay? Is that what it's called?
Yes. Yeah, it's a screenplay or a script.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wrote this script about grief, and I think, if you read the logline or like the one sentence summary, it's about a guy who you originally think has broken up with his girlfriend, and he's like being really bullish about hiking this mountain, and then he's like, yeah, right, there's monsters on this mountain, and then, oh no, there's monsters on the mountain. And for me, it was how I process grief. And also, I think the thing we talked about before and then didn't say is there's been recently a 6th stage of grief added in this psychiatry or that community called making meaning. And it is again, taking the silver linings or thinking, trying to find the good that can be made out of the shit sandwich you were handed. And so that's why with my father, I have to think of if I was given a choice, I would choose him every day. But since we don't have that choice, like you said, and it gave me the courage to be dude, this could end at any minute. There's no time to waste anymore. The fear isn't protecting me anymore. I have to just go out and do it. And so as writing the script was part of that, helped me process, as well as running from, as terrible as it is confronting the grief, running from it is worse. Because in the script, and then I also adapted it into a short story, which you can read on my website, victoriamala.com. But the monsters get worse. Until the end when he's facing down Idris himself.
Oh, I can't wait. So is this out there as
I wish. No.
We're going to put some energy into this.
Thank you. But I am very, very proud to say that it just won Best Screenplay at the Wales International Film Festival, which meant the world to me as an American, that the Welsh were okay, you didn't totally bastardize our folklore. It was a huge, huge honor. But anyway, yeah. And then also it was a big deal for me, again, processing grief in a way that I think allowed me to do so healthily and protected. Also because I forgot to mention too, that I had broken up, I ended my first big relationship a month before my dad died.
Okay. Yeah, nothing like that.
In the immortal words of Megan Thee Stallion. And it was really helpful to process those types of loss in a way where I can put some distance between them. And I also think it's important. And the audiences nowadays, our radars are so high. We're so sensitive to if we're being preached to. And I think putting some creative distance is a really good way for A, you to protect yourself, and B, for other people to find themselves. And then I also think something I really enjoyed about writing Kader, and I think that's really important in the script, is that Morgan and Katie, which are the couple, because you think he's hiking because he's broken up with the girlfriend, but it turns out she passed away. And they weren't on the best of terms. And I'm so blessed that I was actually in a really good place with my dad when he died. But it's also like, how do you create that meaning and that closure for yourself when someone dies suddenly and your relationship is still in progress and there's unresolved things and you hadn't had a chance to go to someone's bedside and say all the things you wanted to say? That's something we don't, and I don't know what your experience was like with Al, your father-in-law, but it's like, it's like, okay, you're in shock. You have to plan a party. You have to go back to work. And then also you have to somehow reconcile, in a lot of cases, this very close, complex relationship for yourself in a way that you can go on living.
And everybody else's relationship, which you have no access to. You have your access and your perspective of their relationship, but no real access to how they're perceiving their relationship. If they've said something 15 years ago that they wish they wouldn't have said or wish they would have apologized for, or, my own relationship with him, which, I was an in-law, so that's different than being married to the son. There's just so much. And so when you realize grief just doesn't hit the same for everybody, it just doesn't. And we want it to, because we want it to be predictable and we want it tangible and something we can control and something that we can hold on to and fix. Also, the fixing, if you're a fixer, that can be very
frustrating. Yeah.
I don't know what the ooh.
Yes, no, it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Working as an executive assistant, you are the fixer.
Yeah, that was your job. And so when you know and you're good at something, that's the job that you will slide into in the family or in the nucleus. And
I'm an eldest daughter, so times that by 100.
Yes.
But I think also can I just come on your podcast, Katie, and say creativity can be a great refuge?
Yes, that's what I want you to tell me. I also want to get to what was the fear that was holding you back before you went? Before you said, fuck this, I can do it. I am doing it. I actually did it. What was the fear that actually held you back? Can you put your finger on it now?
Yeah, I think it was definitely the fear of not being good enough and of being rejected. And I think it was a weird protective thing. If I never try, I never fail.
No, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just so afraid. And I think there's also, being a type A, Leo, eldest daughter, former executive assistant, there's also if I don't know I can be perfect at something, I don't want to.
And you're the best Catholic. So
yes, Catholic of the Year, 2023. 2024, I was not Catholic of the Year.
Yeah.
I really, because and then also too, it was, last year was my actually I can't moment, because I feel like everything of the past 6 to 7 years just caught up with me too. And that's again another thing where I'm you have to and I thought I'd done a great job of letting myself process things. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. I can't get out of bed.
Universe is no, let's just.
Yeah. You cannot grow past your way through grief. Take it from me. But no, I think it was that fear of what if I'm not good enough? What if I get rejected? And what if I'm a failure? And I can't tell you, if I tried to count how many times Showstopper has been passed on, I would throw myself off my balcony right now. And I've written other things. We're just talking about 2 of them. And I think it's that thing of you don't know you can survive it until you survive the first big no. And for me, that was actually Chris Evans. And I think there have been 2 passes in my life where I felt like I was getting broken up with. And he was one of them. But yes, so I have lived through so much rejection. And then you cry, you talk to your friends, and then you realize and then you realize you actually haven't perished. And you get up and you do it again. And I think now I just wish I'd started earlier, that I hadn't waited for so long. And I also think too, because it was very interesting, because acting, I never felt like I could advocate for myself like I do now as a writer. And I think the beautiful part too is again, now that I'm a little older, I don't want to say my age, but I'm a millennial. I wish I was Gen Alpha, but that's the LA for you, being obsessed with you. And I am the substance. No, I'm kidding. But you realize that nothing's wasted. And I'm so glad I had those years. And like, because actually Warner Laughlin's acting technique has so helped my writing. And having all the years of acting so helps my writing of like what needs to be on the page and what doesn't. And because I know intimately what an actor, I specifically right now with like room for, and then working for a director for 5 years, like I know how to write in a way like to leave room for those artists to come in because the script is a blueprint. It's not like what you watch on a screen is usually so far from the document a studio bought.
Yeah.
Because you're making the movie literally until it's released. Like I remember someone once told me like the writer makes their movie, the director makes their movie, and then the editor makes their movie. So and that's what I love about it. It's this like collaborative thing, which allows for discoveries to be made the whole time and surprises to be had in the best way. And then also not in the best way, but also in the best way.
The amount of flexibility that everybody has to have in such a rigid, it seems like a very rigid industry.
Yes.
But where everybody has to have flexibility, no wonder people are fucking in rehab half the time. Like, here, be rigid, but be flexible and also make sure it's urgent and also
like just be chill.
Fucking coffee.
It's under pressure.
Also be cool.
Yeah, like why do you think these people are
Yeah,
like,
yeah, right.
Well, then also too, it's like the thing that also drives me nuts because now you've just set me off is don't take rejection personally, but like when you're auditioning or sending, like I feel like I'm giving you a little piece of my heart when you're reading something I've written.
Yeah, or your whole heart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like
we get this in business a lot too, right? As a female entrepreneur, it's like, well, don't take it personally and don't get too close to your staff and don't do this and do this and don't do this. And I just flipped it on its head and I was like, I actually am not fucking doing that. I am not going to run my businesses like that because it makes me feel dirty. And so I love having a front seat to my staff. I like that they know that I have junk drawers everywhere and that I'm completely fucking disorganized. That's something that makes me real. And I think the last thing we all need is somebody trying to fake their way through a profession or a life or it just doesn't last. I mean, I can tell you, I'm 46 years old. If I didn't have all those failures, all those rejections, you would not see me here. And it gets easier. I will tell you that rejection just gets easier because you're like, fuck you. I don't care. Tell me about your opinion. I don't give a shit. Opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. I think some people say belly buttons, but I like asshole better.
Yeah, because it's dirty.
Yeah, it's dirtier.
Of course. No, well, just also, you inspired like two beautiful points that I want to underline that you just said, Katie, where like one, I think it is so important. And I think there's a big tension in Hollywood right now because the way businesses have been run, they create so much distance. So that's where you get the Miranda Priestleys, where it's like someone does feel okay with treating someone like absolute shit because there's been like this like distance created.
And I wonder, like the Miranda Priestleys or whatever. I mean, she's an easy target. Let's just say that.
Well, she's also fictional and she can't sue me.
Yeah, right. But also that sort of, I mean, I guess I haven't really run into people like that because we're Midwest nice around here. But also like that kind of character has to be so lonely. Like, I think that they did show that a little, not much, but kind of showed like, oh shit, she is human. And, but the lesson there is she didn't last either. She wouldn't have lasted forever. No. People just can't live inauthentically like that.
No.
And we all need a little bit of a reminder of like, hey, this person needs their coffee too.
Yeah. Oh, what's the Rumi quote? We're all just walking each other home.
I love it.
And then I also love what you said about rejection, how it gets easier. And I think one thing that helped me get easier, and also in this discussion about grief, is like actually letting yourself be sad and mourn it a little. Like I got a big rejection earlier this fall. And I was so blessed that like one of my friends, and it was like, cause I had spent months and I was like manifesting and I'm like, this is going to be it. This actor's having a terrible summer. He's low. He's desperate. Like I'm going to get him. His ex-girlfriend's making a movie that's going to bury him. Like this is going to be great. And like, this is his Oscar role. And the rejection came in and like, it was like, my heart was torn out of my chest, but I was so blessed that my friend was like, let's make some good food. I'm going to make you, I was like, I'm going to start drinking even though I'm on antibiotics. She's like, or
Or good friend.
I'll make you like a fun little mocktail. And I'm like, and we're just going to like watch something funny. And like, again, I think that's important too. I think artists nowadays, like, it's like, give yourself a day to be sad. If there's a big rejection and a big no, because some of them are like, you're like, it's funny. I've gotten more into hosting and moderating, and I recently signed with an agency for that. And also, since I have this acting background, my new agent's like, let me just send you out for commercials. And now when I do a commercial audition, I don't give it. Like, I don't care at all. But when someone passes on a script, it's still like, oh,
Yeah.
and it's, again, there can be a hierarchy. Some things we can let roll off our back, and it is what it is. And you build that muscle, you build that shield. But then at the same time, when there's the stuff that really hurts, it's like, how can I give myself some healthy space to let myself be sad and process this? And again, not to bring it back to my script, but Kadir Idris, like, keep it on monster 1 instead of running for it and having it become monster 6.
Yeah. I think that there's so much power in what you say of let yourself feel, right? The problem I think all of us have, and mostly women, is we've just never been given permission nor given ourselves permission to feel. We don't even know how to feel because we've been told, well, don't feel, or if you feel, don't make it public because then you're a bratty, entitled bitch, or you can do this or you can do this. And
don't feel too much because then you're crazy.
Yeah, I think from the monologue from the Barbie movie, I have like listened to 500,000 times. I'm like, God damn it. She just like captured everything.
She's a prophet. I love Greta Gerwig.
She did it so well, but also just the words themselves are just, God damn it. Why? Like, we're still in this place. And, of course, like, we would like to say that we've moved forward, and I think we are making progress. It's just a glacial pour. It just is taking longer than anybody would hope. But the little things, the talking about death, the really just telling people it's okay to feel like shit one day and be like, hey, maybe we, instead of pouring ourselves into a bottle of wine, maybe we should just let it feel for a minute. Eat a fucking salad and go for a walk and see what it feels like tomorrow. And if you still feel like shit, then pour yourself into a glass of wine or whatever that looks like. But we have all of these things, which, by the way, our society makes a ton of money on, that masks the feelings that if we just felt them, we could get through a fuck of a lot faster.
Hallelujah. Like, amen. Like, not to be Catholic about it, but no, I think, and I think that was almost one of the most traumatic things about going through loss that first time with my dad is like, I think I had that instinct, or I'd learned that because I'd been, again, fortunate enough to have worked with a therapist for a couple years before the loss, and then getting that external, like, no. And then again, if you're not pouring yourself into a bottle of wine, like, my thing was I worked. I just threw myself into work.
Yeah, it's not all wine, right? Like, it's shopping or working or just being busy is a drug of choice.
I over-exercised to the point where I tore cartilage in my hip.
Yeah, we have lots of things that will mask.
Metaphorical bottles of wine.
Yes. We have lots of things like that. The other thing you have mentioned a couple of times is the creativity part. Like, you identify as a writer, right? But there are so many creative outlets that you don't even know. We hear people all the time, well, I'm not an artist, I'm not creative, I'm not this, I'm not that, except nobody's actually ever fucking given themselves a chance to do it. Like, how do you know you're not a painter? Have you ever painted? How do you know you're not a runner? Have you ever run? There's so much there. So giving yourself, like, when did you give yourself permission to write, Kadir?
And that was another thing too. It's like, you also don't have to be like, all right, loved one's in the ground, it's time to write my screenplay. Like, it was 3 years. It was 3 years after my dad's death. And I started writing it like right before my script blew up, like the Gene Kelly script blew up. And then I was like, oh, and I think that was a big part of me feeling like I could write it. It's like, oh, wait, CAA thinks I'm a writer. So like, maybe I can do this. And again, like, I'm not proud of how I needed that external validation, but like, I think also, and I think there's also this pressure of like, and for me, since I've made art my profession, it's like, where can you find the things that can just be hobbies and that you don't? And I think also we have this pressure to monetize and be perfect at everything. And That's why I got really into kickboxing. Like, and that was just something because there's so much technique in boxing. And it was so nice to learn something and then there be no
pressure
like on having to perform or do it well or make money off of it. And like my dad actually was an amazing golfer. And since he didn't have any sons, my sister and I grew up golfing. And like that was something I golfed actually for the first time since his death a couple weeks ago, which was so special and wonderful. And like, just like, again, golf, it's like, this is something I can get better at for me, but I'm not trying to go on like
lady PGA.
Yeah. Or like, and I think again, like with creativity and processing emotions, you can just journal and that's great. Or write a stupid story. And actually, this is going to get me like, we're going to take it to next fucking level here with nerdery and embarrassing. Dude, fucking fan fiction. Amazing. Lifeline.
Yeah.
Because again, it's like so much of it's anonymous.
Yes.
You can just like make an account, make your little username, write for whatever you want to. You literally can't make money off it or else you'll get sued because you're playing with copyrighted characters. And like I see, especially for women and queer people, there's like these really fun creative communities that come from it and you get support. And also you like with the screenplay, like I know Showstopper is probably going to be a 10, which is Gene Kelly's script, and even Kadera, those will be like, most scripts are like 10-year journeys.
Wow.
The fact we made Ghostbusters Afterlife in like 3 is insane. 3 years.
Okay, so fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah, movies take and TV shows, they take a long time. And so I think that's something too that when the writers and actors went on strike in 2023, I loved doing short stories because it was like really quick to get, like I could get published and be back and like, oh, the thing's out there. I don't have to wait like a decade. And then, and that's like the fun thing with fan fiction too, is like you post something, people respond to it and you get that little like dopamine hit and then it encourages you to write more. And
yeah, the dopamine hit without the like arrow.
Yeah.
Like the poison arrow that are like,
yeah,
I don't like your hair.
Yeah. And then there's like plenty of like toxic fandom and things going on out there, but it's like kind of nice to like, there are ways. I think we need to, like, as a society, rediscover hobbies. Or maybe just me. I don't want to project.
No, I think you're right. I think that there is, and I sort of coined myself a serial entrepreneur because I've basically taken every single hobby, including drinking, into a job, Amazing. Right? Like I've turned everything into a job. And my husband is the same way. Like if we can't just have something, right? Like when we got our alpacas, we were like, oh, well, of course we're going to like, I got a domain name and right. Like we were going to start a business and we were going to sell the wool and have a fucking petting zoo and whatever. And they have just turned into pure joy for me. That's it. I don't make money on them. They cost us a ton of money actually. Yeah. And it's one of the only things I have in my life that doesn't have some sort of pressure to it. Like, it's a huge win if they eat out of my hand. But that's it. Like there just isn't anything that I'm doing. I just don't have to do. And I think that there's a lack of like things that we do in our life that lack productivity. Right. We're producers, right? Like we're meant to produce, but we don't have to. We can have things that produce. I have lots of things that produce, but also have something that doesn't.
Yeah. And I guess like that was something as me as like the weird, wacky, starving artist to come on, be like, this is something that can help with a lot of big things. And again, like I'm the nut job who's decided to like hang their finances and life's work on this. Yeah. Like you don't have to be, but I found it to be really helpful. So,
but you could. That's also like, actually you can do it. You could. Somebody out here is doing it. Why can't you?
Exactly. And that's been like, also, that was a big revelation for me last year, because we're recording this in early 2025, is again, as you can tell, I love Spider-Man and like, huge comic book nerd. And then it like only really occurred to me in the past couple of years. I worked for a comic book like startup company. But the takeaway from that was like the CEO was like, do you want to pitch a comic book? And it had never even occurred to me that I could write a comic book. And then last summer, I won a free spot into also anyone for being creative. They have online classes. UCLA Extension is great. I took a UCLA Extension class and they have online, so you can do it from anywhere. I took a UCLA Extension class to write Showstopper, and that worked out pretty well for me. and it was interesting too, like in LA, because I took it before the pandemic, like how many actual writers there were. It's like this was kind of like a maybe secret thing or something. There was no shame, and there were people who were complete amateurs, but then there were writers who's like, I need the accountability and the feedback while I'm working on my next thing.
Yeah.
So this summer, I won a free spot into a UCLA Extension course for comic book writing, which is so different from screenwriting.
Well,
Oh my God.
I mean,
But it was
like in my first thought is like, are people still writing fucking comic books?
yes.
But yes, like that's the thing is like we just don't know what's out there. There's so much out there.
And then now I'm pitching like comic books.
Oh
and
my God. I would totally read your comic book.
oh, you're so sweet. I'm going to send this to all the editors I'm pitching.
Yeah. She's going to listen and she's going to watch and she's going to read. She doesn't know anything about it, but she's gonna.
It'll be so fun. No, I promise you it'll be so fun. But I think that's the thing too of like, when you say, actually, I can for the first time, then you're like, again, then like, you're like, oh wait, I can also do this. And then like the short stories, I was like, oh shit. Now like I wrote one, because my manager said he had some success selling a short story for another client. The strike happened. And I was like, okay, well, I know executives, because I used to be one, especially nowadays, need a cosign. So let me try to get this published. And then I got that one short story published in 3 different literary magazines. I wrote 4 more short stories. Now I've been published 15 times on 3 continents. And then it was like, this year I was like, wait, I could write a comic book? And like, yeah, okay, let's like try to do pitches. And now I'm like building relationships with editors, especially because it was a pivot since the film industry's been in the trash for 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's just like,
well, just like the no's get easier, the yeses get easier too. Yeah. It's just like, oh shit, I can do that. Well, what makes me think I can't do this then? And what's the worst that can happen if I try and I fail? Like I always think to myself, there's some sort of, and maybe that is the thing that you don't know until you get into a situation where you can't see the horses, that you don't know that it's not going to end your life. Yeah. There's no urgency and no failure out there is going to end your life except bungee jumping and parachuting.
Sprint racing. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, there are life and death things, but it doesn't mean that you can't do those too, right? Yeah. Like you might not die.
Yeah.
Don't sue me if you're a family member and somebody was like, hey, Katie Rip told me I could bungee jump and then she died. Don't do that.
Safety first. But yeah, no, I think that was something too that one of my like phrases when I was working in development after my dad died was like, this is not the Hunger Games. But it's like I had to be like, oh, right. Like it was almost like a grounding, and it almost like the ridiculousness of it was actually kind of important. Yeah. It's like, yeah, wait, no, like no one's going to get executed if like we don't do. And then also like with the Hunger Games, like there doesn't just have to be one person who like does well.
Yeah.
Who wins.
There can be multiples. Yeah. I say to my staff all the time, and I've said this in here before, I own a coffee shop and I'm like, listen, people, we are not fucking saving babies. We are serving coffee. If somebody has a fit about it, we are not a good fit. We're not a good fit. It's fine. Like, and if shit hits the fan, shut the doors. Like, call the cops and shut the doors. It's going to be fine. We actually do have somebody on our staff that does save babies for a living, but yeah, she does come in and de-stresses while serving coffee. So we're not saving babies here.
Yeah, at this locale specifically.
But she could if we had to.
Which is great. And that's why she's a real asset.
Yeah, a real asset. Oh, this has been so amazing.
Oh my gosh. I've had the best time and like the most beautiful conversation with you. I was very worried about, you have such amazing guests. I'm like, God, I hope I measure.
Oh my God. That's so sweet of you. Thank you. Tell me all about where people can find you. We definitely want to know where we can like read the stories. Give me all the stuff. We'll put it in the show notes for sure. Right. But like, if somebody wants to reach out and say, I'm decided after this, I'm moving to LA.
Don't. Sorry. No, I'm just saying because the whole industry's moving to Europe. So do that.
Okay, then go to Europe. Tell me where everybody can find you if they want to reach out.
Yes. The easiest place to find me is my website, victoriamale.com. Victoria is like the Spice Girl. Male is my last name. It's weird and truncated Italian. You can find me on Instagram at VictoriaMale1. I'm also that on Threads, which is, I think, where I had the pleasure of meeting you.
Yeah.
And
so then, fascinating. That was the first Threads like post I put out there.
Magic.
Yes. The coolest people from it.
Right? Threads is kind of like low key where it's at. And then I'm on Blue Sky because I think we're all trying to collectively leave the bad place. I'm on Blue Sky at Victoria Male.
I love it. This is so lovely. I want to hear, I'm going to follow along like crazy. Yes, and we will definitely put everything that you have mentioned, including the UCLA extension. That is amazing.
Yes, I can send you.
Great. Yeah, that's such a great option. And then we're all going to be pulling for the big screen.
Please, thank you. I know. Hopefully there'll be like some fun announcements this year.
Yes. So. Oh my God. Please, like, let me be the one to know first.
Oh, you're so sweet. I'm a Leo, so I don't think I'm going to be quiet about it.
You were talking about being the firstborn and a Leo, and I'm like, oh, my sister is a firstborn Leo. I am like the proverbial middle child Libra, and then I have a younger brother.
My younger sister's a Libra. No wonder this is,
Obviously.
Amazing.
This is so amazing. Thank you, Victoria. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Katie.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. I hope you enjoyed diving deep into the world of living authentically with me. Before you go, don't forget to connect with me on Instagram. Shoot me a message at Katie Rip. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode and connect with you further. And remember, if you want more details on today's episode or just want to explore more about designing your life unapologetically, head on over to my website at katierip.com. There, you'll find all the juicy details and resources you need to keep the inspiration flowing. Lastly, if you'd like to join me on the show, whether it's to tell about your experience of designing your own life, to share your expertise, or if you'd like to participate in lifestyle coaching live on air, don't hesitate to reach out. Your story could inspire countless others on their own path to living authentically. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep living boldly, designing your life, and remember, #actually I can.